So let's start over. Grand Rising. I am so happy to be here this morning with you as we start our September theme. We had an amazing Sunday last week where we were able to showcase our band. They've been doing concerts for us 3 times a year. We started that this year, and it is a great way to help fund our music program because I wouldn't want to change a thing about it, right? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Karen said that, her dream job is music ministry, and so I'm so happy that we can afford you the ability to live your dreams. Thank you so much for what you do for us. Thank you. Let's give Karen a hand. Well, here we are in September, and boy, Labor Day came quick, didn't it? Yeah. Well, and so apparently now summer's over, according to the unauthorized, world and culture that we live in. Labor Day often ends summer for us, but of course we live in the land of endless summer. So we'll have a couple more months of warm weather here in Southern California. But this is the time of year where people really begin to get busy again, right? It's back to school, back to work, summer's over, you've had your chance for relaxation, and it's time to get busy again. And I know that that's the same for us here at our center. We've actually, our board of trustees is busy. We've actually done some really good work with investing our funds and looking ahead, and we'll be working together to revisit the search team about where we want to have a permanent location. So that is coming up this month, and we have classes that are starting that are really robust. So I highly recommend checking out the Busting Loose from the Money Game class that'll start on October 1. It's online. If you got a computer or a phone, you can attend. And it's going to be taught by Patrick Harbula, who will be here to give a talk and a workshop on the last Sunday of the month. I mean, I am juiced. I'm excited. And I love the theme that we're working with this month. Our theme all year is Rising Higher, Growing Deeper. And this month's theme, as Reverend Carla mentioned, is Transcendent Purpose. And what does that mean, transcendent purpose? I think it's quite brilliant, actually. We are drawing on a body of work from Tricia Hershey. I think she pronounces her name Hersey. And the book that we're drawing from is Rest is Resistance, a Manifesto. And if you don't know anything about Tricia Hersey, like me, I had never heard of her before. She actually is the founder of the NAP Ministry. The NAP Ministry. Some of you are like, oh, that's cool. And some of you are like, oh, holy hell no. NAP Ministry. She's known as the NAP Bishop. And her organization actually goes around and they do little collective gatherings with pillows and cushions and music and guided meditation. And what I think they're actually looking at is framing rest as spiritual renewal. And from my research, when I looked up NAP Ministry, what I can see is that they're really devoted to the restoration and reclamation of the human spirit. And the way that they do that is by recognizing that rest, whether it's taking a nap or slowing down, actually is the place where we can come back to liberate us from the grind. Now, my experience with a good body of work, whether it's a book or whether it's a teaching or a philosophy, is that it reaches out and it's layered, right? It meets people at their different levels. And I really have found this with this idea of rest, and the rest is resistance can meet you at the level if you just want to break some old patterns or some ideas that you keep spinning with, or if you want to go all the way into breaking social patterns. Rest as resistance is really a manifesto about disruption. And sometimes when we can get really stuck, anybody besides me get stuck in a behavior pattern or in a thinking pattern or in a pattern where year after year you keep dumping that guy but he keeps showing up in a different outfit, right? Like whatever it is, or it's the job you quit that you thought, you were never going to work in that environment again, and lo and behold, that next job has got the same patterns going on with it. And so this idea of rest being resistance and being a place of allowing us to disrupt that pattern so that we can step into something new is really powerful and exciting to me. They call it the grind culture. Back in my day, we called it the rat race, right? Right, so it sounds, maybe some of you are like getting what I mean by the grind culture. It's that place where we think we always have to produce over and over again. Like everything's about production. Everything's about, like, you are not valuable to the people that you're with if you don't produce something. Anybody resonate with that at all? Yeah, what a load of crap. It's not true. It's a complete lie. You are valuable and worthy just because you exist. Like that is, you were born whole, perfect, and complete, and then we spend our whole lives, first we unlearn it because we get taught all kinds of other things, and then we have to come back to it again and rediscover it. And this idea of transcendent purpose, and I was saying to Rick earlier this morning about how I love a good paradox, right? Because when we think about purpose, I bet before this morning, rest was not even in the lexicon of ideas that you would have considered when you think about purpose. Because when we think about purpose, we think about all the things that we have to do. We think about all the things that we have to have, the goals that we have to reach, the milestones that we have to touch on as we're moving forward. But that level of purpose, that enculturated level of purpose that we seem to have a relationship with, well, that's a purpose that is more centered on something outside of you, something that you create for an outer purpose. And when we talk about transcendent purpose, we're tapping into a whole different energy. When I owned a tax practice, so my first career, I was an accountant. I was an accountant for 35 years. It got boring, but it was a good livelihood. I made it into interesting when I started my own business, so I could do things on my own time. But there were some certain timetables that I had to manage during a tax season. For those of you who are familiar, I think we all are. Anybody living outside of the U.S. might not know our tax schema, but maybe they do because we whine about it a lot. But every tax season in December, I would begin to gear up, and in January, I would start to hit my stride, and it would feel really good to be productive, and then February would roll into March, and then April, and by the time April 15th came around, I was spent. I was all used up, and trying to get anything done after April 15th was a chore. But as the years rolled by, I began to recognize the importance of breaking the pattern of the grind. And I would purposefully schedule any project that had to happen after April 15th, like after May 15th, maybe even sometimes after Memorial Day. And I would give myself the ability to really rest, to break the pattern of, I got these deadlines, I got to produce, I got to get another tax return out. Breaking that pattern became a really powerful practice. It disrupted the grind mentality of what's next? What am I going to do next? If you're retired, you may have had the experience of being in some kind of a grind culture, and then suddenly there's what? What am I going to do with myself, right? And I think that this idea of rest is so underrated in our culture. We don't realize how nourishing stepping back, stepping away, being apart from, and allowing ourselves, our nervous system to settle down a little bit. Because when we are in a resting state, we are more available to a bigger idea. We're more available to spirit as it wants to use our intuition to help guide us into the next step. When I'm grinding, and I'm sorry to admit this, but I have done my share of grinding as a minister. There's a lot to do, and the to-do list is long. And when I am grinding through, well, sometimes my really good ideas, they're just good ideas. But if I really want to step into like a transcendent experience where I am doing less efforting and I'm doing a greater, let me put it this way, I'm trying not to use the word doing, but it's so steeped into our vocabulary, right? When I can allow myself to step into a place of tapping into transcendent purpose, well, this is a purpose that has nothing to do with anything outside myself and everything to do with what's in here. Because as I started my comments, we were all born whole, perfect, and complete. We have everything we need. You will never be more worthy, more complete, more absolutely valuable than you are right now. You just might not be aware of it. And so stepping into this idea of transcendent purpose reminds us to step back, to slow down, to take a nap. As a matter of fact, I think I want to take a proverbial nap with you right now. And so I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. Maybe put your hand on your heart and take a deep breath in and let it go. And I want you to repeat after me. I am worthy and valuable. Simply because I am. And then I want you to breathe that in again. Nap time's over. Come back. But here's the deal. That's the cycle of life that we're in. Nap time's over. It's time to get back to work. Yes, but can you hold that space? Can you come back to it? Can you draw it into yourself and remind yourself that you are worthy and valuable just because you are? Not because you met your quota, not because you have a certain number of friends, not because of your bank account, but just simply because you are an expression of the divine. Ernest Holmes, the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living, I was looking up the word grace because transcendent purpose and grace, for me, go hand in hand. And so I found where Ernest Holmes, who is the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living and also the author of The Science of Mind, in the 1926 version, he wrote a whole piece on grace, and he had this great line in there: grace is the givingness of spirit to its creation. Grace is the givingness of spirit to its creation. So you are already endowed with grace, worthiness, being valuable. That's just a given. He goes on to write elsewhere that grace and truth are the cornerstones of reality, and he goes on to talk about how life is always sourcing us. Sometimes we miss it because we're in the grind, right? We're in the long to-do list. We're in all the things that we have to get done, huffing and huffing it through our days. And so transcendent purpose comes from within. You know, as I was complimenting and celebrating with Reverend Karen about her dream ministry, clearly this is a transcendent purpose for her. And when you're in that place of drawing from a purpose that comes from within, grace is the hallmark of your every step. And this is where it's really important when we're looking at purpose and when we're trying to redefine it as something that comes from within us. This is the place where I think it's really important not to bastardize Holmes's famous quote, "There's a power for good and you can use it." The quote is, "There's a power for you. There is a power for good greater than you, and you can use it." And it's that little in-between place where we tap into transcendent purpose. It is all of who you are and all of infinity. And so there is a power for good, and it's greater than you, and you can use it. And I don't know about you, but I was domesticated to believe that there was a power for good, and I better damn use it well so I can be successful, so that I can produce, so that I can build my bank account. And there's nothing wrong with all that. It's who we bring to it as ourselves. It's who we bring to those activities. And when we can tap into this idea of transcendent purpose, we begin to tap into true power. If I operate from the cultural or the zeitgeist idea of purpose, then rest is death, right? Rest is death because somebody else is going to get mine. So I got to work harder. But when I remember and tap into this idea of transcendence power, I'm drawing from a well that it is unlimited. It's infinite in its ability to source me in whatever I'm doing. And when we recognize the importance of rest to get ourselves recentered, to tap back into that idea of transcendent purpose versus the world's idea of purpose, then we can allow ourselves to draw upon that power. You all know I'm a big fan of Richard Rohr, and he runs a group called the Center for Action and Contemplation. He's a New Thought master, but he calls himself a Franciscan monk. And when I read this, I thought it just it landed in what we're talking about today. He said, if we have not made contact with our true power, the indwelling spirit, if we've not made contact with our true power, the indwelling spirit, we will seek power in all the wrong places. We will seek power in all the wrong places. He goes on to talk about how power in itself is not bad. Power is a good thing when we're drawing upon it from our higher wisdom self and from spirit. He talks about truly spiritual, holy individuals are very powerful people because they understand their relationship with power. And then he ends his his little piece with what is needed today, as Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. And power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And I might change those words just a little bit in that last sentence. I would say the power is at its best. Power at its best is love implementing the internal demands of transcendent purpose. Internal demands of transcendent purpose. And so when we can allow ourselves to rest, when we can allow ourselves to disrupt the grind long enough to connect with that true power that lives within us, that moves through us, that wants us to hear it, that's when we tap into transcendent purpose. And so my invitation to you this week is to rest. Take a nap. And it doesn't mean you have to lie on a mat in your office in the corner. But maybe just take a minute to remind yourself that you're worthy and valuable simply because you are. That there's more power available to you in the center of your very own being than anything that you can access outside of yourself. Thank you very much. So let's take a deep breath and rest. A little spiritual mind treatment nap, if you will. Breathing in worthiness. Letting go of that breath. Knowing you are the beloved. And so as you lower your gaze or close your eyes, know with me that grace personified is humanity. That as each of us walk through our week, as we continue to hold this idea of transcendent purpose, a purpose that comes from deep within ourselves, that comes from spirit itself, wanting to express itself exactly as who you are, there is no work that needs to be done. We simply breathe in worthiness and value, knowing we're valuable, knowing we are the beloved, knowing that the beloved is us, knowing that the beloved is everywhere, and trusting this transcendent purpose to come forward as we quiet ourselves, as we disrupt the grind, and we know this higher truth. We are worthy simply because we are. We have been created exactly as we need to be. And all we need to do is stop and remember. So I know for each one, a deep recall, a deep reclamation of the truth of our own being, of our worthiness, of how valuable we are, the gift that we are to life. And in knowing this, we celebrate ourselves and everyone around us. We let go of pressure and stress and all our have-tos, and instead we draw upon love. The love that animates all our activities, that brings us forward to whatever is our next yet to do. For this is spirit in motion, as each one. I give great thanks for this recalling, this reclaiming of the transcendent self and the transcendent purpose. It is with so much appreciation that we simply anchor this in the power and the presence of the one mind by saying together, and so it is.